will record this,
but not for
main screen.
not for
full screen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the War Room. This one is for the UFC 257 main event, the notorious Conor McGregor against the Diamond Dustin Poirier. Okay, settle in. We may be here a while. Right, there's loads to talk through in this one. Obviously, this is a rematch. They've got very diverse careers from the last time they faced one another. Obviously, McGregor's been up to 170, and that's the last time we saw him, back a year ago. Poirier, much more consistent in his career. After losing to McGregor the first time, he moved up to 155 and went on a great streak, put a real good lightweight career together to find himself in there with Khabib. Obviously, not enough to beat Khabib on the night, although he had a good showing. He gave a good account of himself, arguably as good as McGregor. Wasn't able to pick up the belt. Turned it back around and got a good win over another tough individual. And now we're here with this rematch. So, where do we start? Do we start with UFC stats? I mean, the thing is, about these guys. You know what these guys bring to the table. Dustin Poirier, slight experience advantage, 26-6 with one no contest, 22-4 for McGregor. Slightly longer fight time for Dustin Poirier, which I will say, if the fight starts to go his way, does lean in his direction. Height is the same. Weight obviously is going to be the same. They're both going to make an effort to get on the scales at 155. You can guarantee that. And the reach advantage is, a slight 2 inches for McGregor. But, he does have long arms and he will make the most of that long left hand, which I'm going to discuss. Both southpaws, another interesting thing. Generally southpaws, they don't get to train with a lot of other southpaws. So they get much better at fighting orthodox fighters, which is why also orthodox fighters don't like southpaws very much, because you don't tend to have many in your gym to get used to the different skill set that you need. There are a few reasons why this is an interesting talking point, and one of them is because Dustin Poirier can utilize the calf kicks very, very easily on Conor McGregor, which will nullify a lot of his game if he's used effectively. As we know, the calf kick is very effective. So both southpaw, around the same age. We'll get into this. We'll get into this in a little while. The striking and grappling stats and stuff, as and when it's relevant. Okay, where do we start? Let's start with McGregor's left hand. Now, the reason I wanted to focus on this immediately is because whenever we've covered this on Inside the Octagon, it's always been a bit short. We've always had to cut bits out of it, and there's a lot to talk about with this left hand. Now, there's a typical pattern to it. As you can see here against Brandao. So Brandau's backed up against the fence, and there's actually a left hook that hurts him to the body, which is why he's backed up in this position. But Brandao he'd given his best. He's got about 4 minutes in the tank when he's under pressure. And he's backed up against the fence here. Now, McGregor generally likes people moving in this direction, right? He likes to cut people off, so he'll force them in that direction. It's like a choke point, and there are a few reasons for that, which I'll get into in a moment. But just you'll remember this fight. That left hook to the body right hook to the body was a nice little dig, but Brandao was already done by this point. And as he goes down, he's just covered, and McGregor's pouring on the pressure. The most important thing to focus on though is the direction. So look where McGregor is here, right? As this left hand comes over the top, cracks Brandao across the face, he's punching basically towards the corner post, right? Something else that McGregor does a lot. Now, generally southpaws, they want to be in this position here. They want to circle round, so they're punching you into the fence with their power hand, which is why most people, they always say circle away from the power hand. So actually, Brandao's doing the right thing by circling this way along the fence. He's a bit close to it, admittedly, but he's moving in the right direction because he's moving away from the power. But that is generally how McGregor likes to throw this left hand. He punches people across, and watch his back foot, watch here. As the punch goes, that foot drags and lands over close to the fence. So there's a reason why this overextension is safe for McGregor. Like, look at that curve from that back foot where the toes are barely on the ground, all the way through to that left hand. The reason that overextension is safe for him is because the fence is on this side of him. Like that overextension out in the octagon and the person's cut the angle and then you're dealing with them here when you can't turn to face them quick enough to stop what's coming. So the reason this pattern's effective for McGregor is because he's closed off on that side, because he is protected. Look, his foot even bangs into the fence as Brandao goes down. And I will reinforce this a couple of times. So you're not just having to take my word for it, but you'll even see it in the Cowboy fight, which I am going to do as a separate segment to this show. So do check that out. Here we go again with Seaver. Look, right down the pipe. But look the direction that Seaver's moving. McGregor's cut him off. He's moving in this direction to make this area here the out for Seaver. He's opening a door for him by cutting this one off. He's closed this door here. Is this making sense? I hope it is. So as Seaver's moving, McGregor's punching him down the pipe towards the corner post again. Look, we've got Anderson Silva on this corner post over here. Punching generally in that direction. Now, there is a reason I feel that this happens. Here we go. There's one other example of it. Now, this wouldn't be applied, I don't think, in the same way if this was a boxing ring. The reason is because the octagon gives you an additional 35-degree angle where you can force people out into space that's there, which isn't there in a boxing ring. So a lot of the conceptions that we have, look how similar these positions are, look. I mean, same thing again, look, he's closed this door here, which means that Chad Mendes feels like he can circle off in this direction, and this is the safest way to go because that's where the space is. But McGregor creates a choke point, which is here, look, right up to the corner post. Hang on, let me do that again. So there's the corner post, and there's the choke point that McGregor's created. So now he's caught in this wedge where he has to move towards the fence, and he has to be somewhat at the brunt of that left hand of McGregor. As I was saying about a boxing ring, so let me just pause this for one moment. If this was a boxing ring, for example, from this corner post here, the ring goes that way. That's a terrible line. I did do graphic design, I swear. There we go. So that'd be a boxing ring, right? So as Chad Mendes is circling towards that post, he's becoming aware that there's a barrier, which means he has to do something about it, either move this way or move the opposite. In the octagon, that's not there. There's an additional 35 degrees, which is there. So this extra bit of space allows McGregor to force them into it, and then he resets, and he keeps forcing them to repeat that same pattern. So he's able to eventually catch them with that left. But the preference to always be over towards the fence is quite consistent. Now, this was his last fight before he stepped over to the UFC and Cage Warriors. This was quite a spectacular knockout, and this shows, because obviously with McGregor's game we've seen a real refinement with his left hand, and I describe it like a spear point. Right now, the whole of this pencil is useful, but the tip of it is the thing that does the work. Right, that's representative of the left hand of McGregor. If his whole game is a spear, most of it is handle, and the tip is the left hand. So he's built his game around it to bolster it. His footwork, his kicking game, he uses wide kicks to sweep people into the positions that he wants, which is most familiar. But he has also got other facets to that left hand. The application of it's not the same every time. So what you'll see here is a beautiful slip out of the way. Look at that. Straight out of the way and then crack over the side. And I believe there's a young John Gooden there. Johnny G's. But I mean, you could just look at the timing of that. Like, McGregor's reaching for this lead hand here. So he's going to tie that up anyway. He knows that the jab's not coming because he's tying it up. If it comes wide as a left hook, you can also see that his elbow's kind of flared. So anything coming in this outside gate is what it would be called in Wing Chun, would be covered by this arm. It's a bit of a risk, but obviously the wide guard is much more beneficial. And in boxing, a tight guard is beneficial because you've got big gloves to create more padding. Whereas we don't have those big walls in MMA, so we have to utilize reach and vision and reactions a little bit more. So you can see McGregor's reaching out for this lead hand here. He's reaching to catch that, to tie that up, to force his opponent to throw this rear hand, because that's what McGregor wants. And he wants this rear hand to be fired. So as it comes out, it's going to go the opposite side of McGregor's head. McGregor's going to slip to the inside and then uncork that left hand. Watch. Slip, bang. And I mean, stiff, like that leg is, it might as well not have a joint in it. It's so stiff. It was a lovely punch. And we saw the same thing with the Eddie Alvarez fight as well, you know, like an adaptation of the delivery of the left hand. You know, he knows that is the best weapon in his game, and he's, you know, he's not trying to hide the fact that it's very effective. He built his game around it. This is the Eddie Alvarez one where, you know, he builds this barrier. Look at that. There's the good example of it. This is him flicking his left hand out there, right? So I want you to imagine this from Eddie Alvarez's perspective, right? You're viewing it from this direction. So you're seeing through Eddie Alvarez's eyes. What you're seeing here is Conor McGregor at full extension with his left hand reached out, and it's what, a good 10, 12 inches away from Eddie Alvarez's face. So what McGregor's done there is he's created a false wall that Eddie Alvarez feels safe that he's behind. It's like there's like an invisible barrier there now. In Eddie Alvarez's range checking mind, which he's got as a fighter, he knows that right now he's out of range of that left hand. But what he's not seeing is how McGregor, just like his last opponent with that stiff lead leg, look how McGregor's firing this lead leg stiff, which is forcing his hips away. So it makes it look like his body's further away than it actually is. Because if he wants to, he can lean all of his body weight over this lead leg, right? There's his lead leg. If he wants to lean his body weight all the way over that brings his hips forward, which means that punch is through the back of Eddie Alvarez's head. So this is whether it's conscious in the moment or it's learned through practice, which I think is more likely. He's playing this game where he's creating a barrier for Eddie Alvarez so he feels safe. There's that same punch again, look. Like he's reaching for that lead hand, same as he did in the last fight, reaching to occupy that hand, and then he's going to get Eddie Alvarez to fire this hand over his shoulder and slip to the inside. Now, because of the speed that Alvarez moved at, he closed distance and didn't run onto the brunt of a powerful punch. It was the follow-up shot that hurt Eddie Alvarez, but that's reset by the lead hand of McGregor, just scooping him into range, bang, and then there's the second follow-up shot. Here we go, here's a different perspective of the same punch. Lovely work. That play of range is very, very clever, and it's one of the reasons why he's got such a presence against, there it is again. There it is again. This is the best example of it. And this is the one I covered on Inside the Octagon. As I said, sometimes on those shows, I don't really get to fully get into the meat of these breakdowns. So he's tying up this lead hand here, as you can see, he's reaching again. And he's going to throw a left hand out that's just clips Eddie on the side of the head, but he's still not meaning to land it because he could have traveled further forward on this leg. He's still holding his hips back. And then he's going to snap another jab out again, which is going to do the same thing. Look at his body posture. Full extension. I'm reaching. I can't touch it. My arm's not quite long enough. But you're not seeing how far away his hips are away from Eddie Alvarez, which is intentional. He's creating a barrier here. Look how still Eddie Alvarez is, right? He feels like there's a line down here, which he's safe behind, right? So as we leave that line there, watch what happens here. McGregor adjusts his lead foot, and now look how close his lead foot is to that line. I'm going to skip it back so you can see where it was. There it is throwing the jab, right? It's going to skip forward onto that line, and then the left hand comes straight through that line. So now we're not 10 inches away, we're 10 inches behind, which is why you can't get away from these punches, because they're, even though you feel like as he's moving through range, you're safe, he's creating a range which is false to you. So you can't guarantee that what you're seeing is what's accurate. This is why he commands the space so well. There it is again. Like, this is from Eddie Alvarez's perspective. Look, like that looks like a reach. There's a reach feel to it. I know I'm lingering on this point, but this is the beauty of range play and control of range management within MMA. Again, look, like literally whiffs the tip of his nose with the glove, and that's a slip out of the way. If McGregor hadn't made that adjustment with his shoulders, watch this area here. That adjustment gets him out of the way of taking that, and it also sets his left hand up to come over the top as Eddie Alvarez's momentum's already coming forward, right? Bang. He's walking onto that left hand. It's a beautiful punch, and the thing is, like, you can be wowed by the beauty of someone's game that's diverse and can do what Charles Oliveira does. He can strangle the life out of you, can knock you out. You know, guys that can do all different things. It's amazing to watch. the guys that have got one particular facet to their game and you know it's coming and you can't stop it, there's something quite beautiful about that as well. And that's what we see with McGregor. I'm not going to linger on this next playlist, but this is basically how he's sweeping people into position. Like, he's controlling people with his footwork, with his presence. He spreads himself out real wide, but then he cuts people down against the octagon. His footwork is always forcing people to move away from his left hand. But as they move away, they get circled. I covered it in the aftermath with Khamzat Chimaev against Meerschaert. You go a tight circle on the inside of the octagon and you corkscrew them to the outside. You scoop them to the outside of the fence. So what McGregor's doing here, like say for example, so what is he doing? He's starting off in his corner over here. He comes out and then he scoops and he forces you around. So he's taking control until you find yourself right back up against the octagon. It's a very common footwork, but if people know how to utilize it well, and again, everything is forcing you to move in that direction. But the kicking range is a very, very valuable thing for McGregor because everything else comes off it, and he can so casually cruise through kicking range. And again, at 155, he's more dangerous at this range as well because he's more agile. He's a bit lighter. He's got a bit more gas in the tank because he's not carrying quite as much muscle mass. But as we saw in the Chad Mendes fight, not only can it be a good tool for range management, but it can also be a tool for taking the life out of your opponent. Like Chad Mendes, those front kicks, I know he took it on short notice as well, so that's something you have to bear in mind. He'd not got his crunches in the day before. He'd not been doing his conditioning, so he was probably going to get tired anyway. And then McGregor focusing on the body with the kicks and the hooks slowly saps the energy out of him. Now, this was a really intelligent fight, but whether this would work as a 5-round game plan or not, I don't know, because I don't know whether McGregor can maintain this over 5 rounds. This certainly can do this, but you look at the time here, we're 10 seconds before the end of the second round, and I mean, this looks like it's the end of the fourth because they're both tired. Partly because Chad Mendes has taken it on short notice, and partly because McGregor's been forced to work. But again, look at the position of the punch when it hits him. Choke point. Beautiful. Choke point's like 300. I know I've mentioned that before. Where the Leonidas and his 299 Spartans controlled the hot gates. I forgot the name of it last time, and someone put it in the comments, so thanks for that. Okay, where are we now? What's next? So Poirier's coming next, and we're going to talk about the low kicks because, like I said before, he's fighting another southpaw here. And what we know about McGregor is because he lifts all of his weight off his rear leg when he's fighting, he puts all of his weight onto his lead leg. So if Poirier can start chopping away at that lead leg, it nullifies big chunks of McGregor's game. I mean, it effectively breaks the handle of the spear because McGregor now can't plant all of his weight onto that lead leg to throw that left hand over the top with all of his power because that leg's going to be dead, and to put weight on it is going to be painful. We know how effective a calf kick can be. Let me say that again. We know how effective a calf kick can be. A calf kick being singular. You only need to land one in the right shot, and then, I mean, that could effectively be a round or two where that is a nullified limb. If Poirier is able to land that early, then the threat of the left hand is significantly diminished, as well as the kicking game, because the majority of it is left leg. So he needs to plant all of his weight on his right leg to throw those kicks. So if you dismantle that leg in the early rounds, that puts Poirier in a position where he can force McGregor into a position where he may have to work, he may have to clinch, he may have to wrestle, and again that forces him to work, which long-term game plan would be valuable. Look at this fight against Jim Miller, how he's chopping into the lead leg. Like this is what I'm saying. This is what he needs against McGregor. Pay attention to the time. We're 30 seconds into the first round. Oftentimes Poirier looks quite comfortable and he cruises and he does that little jog back. He throws a shot, dun dun dun, little jog back. That's very, very consistent. There's a little jog back. So that's something he's got to watch out for, those little predictabilities. Like if I'm seeing them, other people are seeing them as well. Oh, little jog. See what I'm saying? You see these patterns. But then there are other times when he utilizes it well and he's able to step through behind it. Now, if I'm Dustin Poirier coming into this, I'm thinking that lead leg is a big target of mine. In the early rounds, I can limit myself to low kicks and I can limit myself to a nice clean jab and picking my shots and not getting too involved. if there's the opportunity to throw the odd power shot, then by all means, do it. But don't get wading into range, throwing your power shots and squaring up, because that's when it's going to be problematic for you when McGregor starts landing that left hand, because there definitely is a power difference between the two of them. The work rate of Poirier is what gets him ahead in the game. It's his ability to wear people down, to take their best shots, and to keep pushing forward. And when you see him in one of those flurries, when you see him come crashing forward, that's when you know he's in his element. That's when he's at his most natural. That's instinctive for him. So there is going to be a challenge for him in trying to control that, because I'm not saying that's not going to be valuable to him, but he needs to use it in the later rounds. If he goes out there in the first round and he starts trying to blitz McGregor, then McGregor's going to start firing back with that left hand, and he's going to pick him off. Because whether McGregor's moving forward with the left hand or moving back, he knows how to deliver it with one shot to knock people out. We've seen that consistently, and we know that he's already knocked Poirier out once before. So he's got that in his head. Poirier's also got that in his head. The reason why I say Poirier's got that in his head is because that's also significant. Because oftentimes in the first 90 seconds of a fight, Poirier can be quite tense, depending on who he's fighting, of course. Michael Johnson got a win over him in about 90 seconds. He's been hurt a couple of times in the first 90 seconds or so. So, there seems to be a bit of tension in his frame, which may make him more susceptible for those shots that sting him and just put him down on a knee for a second. In which case, McGregor's going to pile on those hammer fists and get the referee to stop it like he did the first time. Okay, so Poirier as a brawler, valuable once he's slowed McGregor down. If he's damaged that lead calf, if he's forced McGregor to work into the later rounds, then he can start really putting his foot on the gas. But this is him WEC days. This is him when he was. This is Mickelwright, yeah, Josh Mickelwright. This look, we're 10 seconds in here. This is a wild flurry. Look at the position of his body here, though. He's on his toes and he's lunging forward. Like his feet are on this line and his shoulders are over the Harley-Davidson sign. There's a good distance where he's got no control of his forward momentum. And we still see that in the UFC today and in his more recent fights. If he starts off like this, it puts him in a very vulnerable position. And it also he'd be running into McGregor's punching range when McGregor's freshest and he's going to deliver the biggest power. This Poirier in the later rounds is basically a slightly better version of Nate Diaz. He's going to be faster. He's going to hit heavier. He's going to be he's going to work harder. He's going to be a busier fighter, and he does fight in these bursts as well. Like Nate does erode you and he kind of slaps you about a bit. But Dustin Poirier is like a dog on a bone when he feels like you're hurt. And he's like, you're done. And he won't let go. That's a really valuable quality because that is pressure. And he can maintain these flurries as we've seen. This is a good example here. Like this is a flurry to the bell. We've got 10 seconds here against Pettis. But just look how square he is. Look how aggressive his posture is. Hands down, taking shots. Early rounds, this is dangerous. Now here, watch this. Look, he's loving it. Little pat on the bum. Yeah, we're having a good time. If that's where he's in his element. And same thing with Gaethje. Now look at this. This is the beginning of the fourth round. So these have already battled for 15 minutes. Take McGregor as a 170-pound fighter at the start of 2020. Then you bring him back at 155 at the start of 2021. Does he look as fresh as these guys at the start of the fourth round? I don't know. And if he doesn't, and he's been beaten up with those calf kicks, then you've got Poirier pouring this kind of power on, and something's going to get through. And if it doesn't get through, if it's not enough to hurt him, it might be enough to force him to level change, which is what we saw against Nate Diaz. So this is where another element of Dustin Poirier's game comes in, which is the neck attacks, the Darce chokes. And like we've discussed with Max Holloway in the earlier War Room, oftentimes strikers that have got high volume styles, they tend to bolster their game with A, takedown offense, and then B, guillotines. Knockout punchers don't tend to get to the guillotine stage because they tend to knock everybody out, so they don't need to. But if you're wearing people down, but it's time for them to level change, then you add neck attacks to it as your next line of defense after your sprawl and your underhooks, etc. Poirier's got a really good DARS game. He's got a really good neck attack game, and oftentimes it's easier to get those submissions if somebody's level changing on your terms instead of theirs, like if they're under pressure. One thing that we can't discount, though, is McGregor's grappling. And what I will say is, because he came into that last fight with those shoulder strikes, he showed another facet of his game, which is again, it's something that we didn't expect the last time around. So we can't be foolish and not expect something new this time around as well. Now, against Max Holloway, when he got that knee injury, he had some really nice takedowns, some real, like a nice variety of takedowns. I know I just blasted through this playlist, but where was it? He had some really nice variety of takedowns. I mean, what we got here? Come on, War Room. Okay, there we go. Catch single leg. Going to be useful if Poirier is chipping away at that lead leg. Catches that, elevates it, trips the rear leg, runs him down, and then straight into a pass. Look at that. Hops to one side. Beautiful work. Here's another one. High crotch, runs the pipe. Nice. Arm over the top as well, look. So what we got here, he's coming right in. Look at this, arm's nice and deep. Right, hooking up, so it's got control of the right leg of Max Holloway. And then as he comes over here, he's going to throw his right arm over the shoulder of Max Holloway. So you can see now he's hooking this leg up in this direction, and he's driving this arm down in this direction. So there are three types of force on Max at the moment. He's got pressure down on his leg, pressure down on his shoulder, pressure down on his hip, and he's also being spun at the same time. So to stay on one leg with all of those things happening is incredibly difficult. And this is the other bit I wanted to show you, because these are the little bits that go unnoticed oftentimes. Thought process about pressure, especially when you can utilize things like the fence and that kind of stuff. Like Max Holloway's already in a pretty uncomfortable position here, right? Back of his head's up against the fence, which honestly feels like a cheese grater. It's really uncomfortable to get your head dragged down the side of it. So now Conor's he's trapped this leg here, he's trapped this foot, just stepped over it, and he's going to hop over again, and he's going to completely pass to side control. Now, before Max can do anything, McGregor's going to drive his head down. Watch this replacement of his shoulder. Shoulder goes onto the chin of Max Holloway, and then he's going to smush it down against the fence. And you see how Max Holloway pulls himself away. Like when he gets to this position, the amount of pressure in his head, onto his head, into the fence here, it must be excruciating. So if you actually watch this foot here, he's actually going to move himself away. See that? Like he pulled himself away from the fence to relieve that pressure, which in the immediate situation was a relief of a bad circumstance. But the bad circumstance now is that McGregor's into side control and progressing to mount. We saw a lot of good skills, good grappling skills in this fight, and we have seen very little of his grappling skills aside from defensive stuff against Khabib. But I think his offensive grappling is going to be quite good if we get to that stage. Lovely work controlling Max here, and ground and pound is going to be as thoughtful as it is on the feet with McGregor, as you would expect. I don't think he's going to want to grapple. Is my honest thought, and the reason for that is just because it's not a good use of his energy systems to be wrapped up and grappling and trying to control somebody or get somebody to the floor. Like for every one takedown and 30 seconds of control, he might be able to throw 10, 15 left hands with that same bank of energy. Now look at this. This is a lovely little mount for here. So look at that. So Dennis Siver's turned all the way over. He's effectively given McGregor his back here, but McGregor wants to mount him instead. So he's got one knee on the inside of his guard, so that knee's on the inside of that leg. He's going to hop across and replace that knee with this knee. Bam, bam. Hop across, replace, and then that other leg steps all the way over. You see how wide that goes? Look how wide he's brought this foot here. That's right out at the side. And now what he's going to do, he's going to drop that knee to the floor, and then he's going to sweep legs over. And you see how he replaces his knee again? Right knee, sweep, bump, and then he's in mount. So basically, what I'm trying to illustrate here is we can't discount the grappling skills of McGregor. There's definitely skills there that we've not seen, and there's definitely room to be tested in a fight against Poirier. Again, somebody who doesn't really like to grapple necessarily, not really that bothered about doing it, would much rather strike. But it might be valuable for Poirier to tie him up and wear him out a little bit. It might also be imperative for McGregor to try and get him to the floor if he's tired and he's under pressure, or if he's taken some kicks to that lead leg. I mean, he got a knee injury in the Holloway fight, so his option was to grapple. He might do the same thing here. Now, this is what I'm talking about with level changing under pressure, because Brookins is doing everything here to get his head out of the way of these punches. And the last thing he decides to do, which is the worst thing, is to put his head right into the Darce position of Poirier, who, as you can see, he wraps it as he level changes, wrap around. So now he's gone around the neck and he's gone around the other arm as well on the opposite side. Sprawled away so the legs aren't there for Brookins to grab. And then look at that. So he's going to fire his right arm through. He's going to try and get around the dreadlocks of Brookins, and he's going to get that hand to the bicep. There it is. Hand on the bicep, and now watch that. So hand on the bicep here, right? What I want you to watch is as this hand here moves up the back of Brookins, you'll see this hand also slide slightly up the bicep, which is what's tightening the choke. Dun, 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 little tighten, and then he's going to drop to the side. And Brookins is trying to do the right thing by answering the phone, so Poirier sits to the opposite side and chases to catch his legs. Doesn't get a leg, gets an arm instead. And beautiful. And he's able to extend his hips in. Like Dustin Poirier at the moment, at this point, is trying to chase to hook a leg. You can see him reaching right over here to try and hook this leg. But when he doesn't get it, unfortunately for Brookins, because he's wearing a glove, it gets caught between the legs of Poirier. And Poirier uses that to straighten and to drive his hips in, which then folds the head of Brookins into the neck, into the forearm of Poirier. It's a lovely submission. Really nice. And it's not the first time he's used it. I mean, I think there's 3 submissions on his record like this. Here's a lovely example against Eric Coe. And this, unfortunately, was not the end of the fight for him. This was a much harder fought fight than this. But what you can see in this, I mean, look, so here we are. He cinches this up at 30 seconds left of the first round, right? So he's in kind of an awkward side control position. His knees in, Coke's on his side, Coke's digging the underhook, obviously left arm underhook. And you can see Poirier's gone over his underhook and he's coming through with this arm here. Now this hand's going to fold up and wrap around the neck of Coe. There it goes, look. Folds up, and then it's going to go onto, then the hand is going to go onto the left bicep. And then watch how he sits to his side. So now imagine, now what we've got here is, and I'll try and fill it in so you can see there's the arm of Dustin Poirier, right? And that's about the thickness of his forearm in that position. So you can imagine that as this pressure goes down through the body, that pressure is then being transferred onto the head of Coe, which is then forcing the top of his head down and the forearm into the side of his neck. So this space is then going to change as a knock-on effect. Collapse down. Look at that. Pressure. And when it skips forward to here, the last 10 seconds. And Coe's doing the right thing to defend. He's moving his hips away so Dustin Poirier can't chase around and tie them up. But I mean, you can just see how tight this is. And these are the kind of things that are very effective when you've got someone that's already tired and you want to, you want to put some pressure on. You can just keep attacking their neck, and you're not only getting close to a finish, but you're also interrupting their breathing. So if someone's heart rate and their lungs are already going, and then you're going, you've got to think how taxing that is on your cardiovascular system, to the point where you feel like you're running out of oxygen before you actually would. Gets to 10 seconds to the end of a round, and you would think to yourself, oh, you can hold your breath for 10 seconds. But if you're already gasping, your body's like fighting for oxygen, and now you've got no air coming in at all, a panic can set in. And I'm not saying McGregor's necessarily one for panic, but that face bar was a face bar. It wasn't a rear naked choke. There wasn't a choking element to it. Very, very uncomfortable, very painful, of course. And with the amount of pressure, of course he could have gone to sleep. But I don't think that was the situation. I think it was much more of a physical pain thing, which is why he got the tap. So when it comes to this fight, let me just wrap it up and summarize, because I know I've been rattling for a good little while now. If Poirier starts off with footwork, with a decent jab on his toes and chops into that lead leg of McGregor, that starts to nullify the major weapons of McGregor and all of the synergistic arsenal that goes with it, all of the supplementary stuff that he can use to bolster that left hand, that nuclear weapon that he's got. So that's the first protocol for Poirier. Work that lead leg, stay on your toes, and don't really engage for the first 2 rounds. It's a bit of a I'm going to try and squeeze an Enter the Dragon quote in every show. Why not? It's a bit of an art of fighting without fighting. It's like, you remember the bit on the boat where the guy's trying to pick a fight with Bruce Lee. It's like, well, what's your style? It's the art of fighting without fighting. And he's like, show me some of it. And Bruce Lee's like, later. He's like trying to be dismissive. He's trying to not fight. And that's the art. Like Poirier's kind of got to play that a little bit in the first 2 rounds. He's got to move. He's got to pick. He's got to be playful and not get caught up in, I've got to take his head off because I hate him so much. Because that's the emotional side that he loses control of. And that's where McGregor's so good at riling people up and forcing them to make those mistakes. Like Aldo was the king of the world for forever. And then he gets fired up, runs at McGregor, he runs straight into a left hand. Whether you're moving away or moving towards him, that left hand's always got to be something you've got to be aware of. So my first line would be to start dismantling it by attacking that lead leg. And the lead leg's an obvious one. And this is an analogy for you, another military one. Alexander's troops figured this out when they were facing elephants on the battlefield. Obviously, they didn't know what elephants looked like. They'd never seen them before. These giant things that were running at them. Oftentimes, they had these like a small wooden fortress on the back of the elephant with sort of 4, 5, 6 archers in the back that would all be firing off the back of this elephant as it's charging at you. Now, the amount of time that was probably wasted trying to take those archers out was probably cost them hundreds and thousands of men. But when they realize that they can attack the back of the elephant's knees, then the whole thing tumbles down, and then those guys are left to face you hand to hand, which is not what they're built to do. It's like forcing them into a game plan that they don't want. They want to stay on the top of the elephant and keep firing that left hand over at you all the time. But if you take away the wheels of the mechanism that's running it, then you can dismantle whatever it's carrying. That's the smart thing for Poirier to do. For McGregor, he's going to command the space as he does. He's probably going to feel like he's got the fight beaten before it started. So it's all about him delivering that left hand with perfect precision. There's a beauty and an art to it for McGregor, which is wonderful when it plays out and when we get to see it in full effect. But there is also an opportunity for Poirier to find his way in here. Dig a trench, make it ugly. Force McGregor to work in ways that he doesn't want to. Don't be the fighter that he's anticipating you be, which is the reckless, aggressive, I'm going to take your head off because I get so emotional. Like, don't be slapping his hand away at the press conference and all those kind of things. That's the game. They're the triggers that McGregor's looking for. It's the beauty of this is that there are so many different games being played before they actually start to lock horns. And unfortunately for Poirier, this is something that in his career that has been a stumbling block in the past, and we've not seen him overcome it. He's been in big fights against the likes of Khabib, but he's not been in situations where someone's really been trying to get under his skin like that. Like even with the Alvarez back and forth of all the chaos there was still a respect there that you're just not going to get with Poirier and McGregor, and that's the difference going into this one. Is there anything I've not covered? I don't think so. Strikes landed per minute. Obviously, Dustin Poirier has got a high work rate, but McGregor's right up there. But then you've got to bear in mind that his fights are a lot shorter. So the strikes landed per minute for Poirier, that stat, you've got to imagine that spread over a longer period of time. More fights, longer octagon time, etc., etc. Striking accuracy. I mean, Poirier lands 50%, but he's throwing everything to knock you out. McGregor lands 49%, but most of them are shot-ups. Most of them are set-ups for that left hand. So, I don't read too much into these things, as I say. Strikes absorbed per minute, strike and defense, very, very similar. Takedown average, higher for Dustin Poirier. Good takedown defense for McGregor, as we know, and you've got to imagine that's pretty strong coming off a Khabib training camp. No submission attempts for Conor McGregor. That might be the surprise in his arsenal this time around, but I doubt it. But no submission attempts for McGregor. 1.3 for Dustin Poirier. Neck attacks. If he can play it smart in the early rounds and he can force McGregor into those later rounds and make him work, tie him up, flurry and then disengage, maybe get to a stage where McGregor's tied up against the fence. We've seen it in the Diaz fight and he's landing a bunch of shots. McGregor level changes and there's a D'Arce choke right there waiting for him. That's the most obvious game plan for me for Poirier. Most obvious plan for McGregor is that he manages to scoop him onto that left hand at some point. That would be the cleanest and most obvious finish, and that's what most people, I would say, are expecting. And looking at the odds, it looks like that's what the bookmakers are expecting as well. But we can't count Poirier out. You know, he's one of those guys he's always on the edge of a resurgence, and we see this in lots of other fighters around. You know, the likes of, how many resurgences of as Alistair Overeem had, or Masvidal, for example. You know, there are guys. There's American Top Team connection there as well. Don't know what's in that, but there's definitely a possibility that Poirier can come in and look absolutely spectacular in this one, and really be a problem for McGregor over 5 rounds. Really force him to battle and work hard. But obviously, it's all about keeping his head together and making sure his head's not in line of that left hand when it starts firing off in the first round. It's going to be an excellent fight. It's a great way to kick off 2021 and a great way to wrap up the first visit to Fight Island in 2021. So enjoy the fights, and I'll see you next time.